Penguin Random House Audio presents A Mother's Love, a novel by Sara Blaedel. Read for you by Christine Lakin. For Lars and Andreas. Prologue. I stepped back in shock, silently trying to comprehend what had just happened. Paralyzed, I saw the blood flowing in slow motion across the floor and down into the cracks between the worn floorboards. The silence hummed in my ears as I watched the motes of dust shimmering sluggishly in the light from the windows. My morning had started early. The sun low in the sky as I sat over my coffee and thought through the day's obligations. There were good days and there were bad days. This one, I had sensed, would be good. But here we were. Adrenaline pumped through me. After the first few blows, I already knew that she was no longer conscious. The muscles in my arms trembled. Even so, I struck again. A sound from behind brought me back. I quickly collected the heavy cutting board from the floor, surprised that so much blood was pouring out of the copper-colored hair. The gash on the back of the head didn't look like much. I heard a car drive by outside. Normal. Everyday sounds slowly returning, and I realized that I had to get away fast. I didn't worry about covering my tracks. In a way, I didn't care. Tucking the cutting board under my arm, I simply walked out of the restaurant. Well, I thought, I'm done with that. Now I could finally find some peace. Chapter 1. I don't recognize a single one of the names on this list, Louise Rick fumed, tossing the piece of paper across the desk at Sara. We've been discussing this new travel unit for a month and a half. We've been planning for ages. We've agreed. But what the hell was the point of all those preparations if you're just going to scrape together a few of the dregs from different police districts and call them my new team? She was so angry that she wanted to storm out. But she pulled herself together and forced herself to explain, slowly. None of us know each other. We haven't worked together before. We have no basis for being able to leverage each other's strengths. These are all the things we agreed couldn't happen. Her very first partner from the homicide department shrugged. Sara had been a bigwig in the Danish National Police for years now, and one of the many projects he'd been put in charge of was establishing a new travel unit to replace the old mobile task force. After a failed investigation into the murder of a young teenager in Korsør, a case that had landed squarely on Valine's shoulders, he received permission to set up a special travel unit, an investigative group that could be ready to help the country's 12 police districts solve violent crime cases on an as-needed basis. That travel unit had come to be known as Police District 13, or simply P13, and Louise had been selected to lead it. You know as well as I do that the government has cut the national police force in half, Valine said. Things have changed. Up yours, Louise snapped. I gave up my position as head of homicide to lead P13, and now that we're at the starting line, you do an about-face and take back everything you promised? Okay, stop, he said, holding his hands out to her pleadingly. Find someone else, Louise replied, heading for the door. They're waiting for you in Odense. Let me tell you something. She spun on her heel and was right up in his face in a couple of quick steps. I didn't take this position to fail, or to have an excuse to not be home with my son and the other people I care about. I took this job because I believe I can help make a difference and contribute to increasing the clearance rate, that I can help police districts when they get bogged down in their investigations. But it's not something I can do on my own. That's been the agreement the whole time, that we would put together a small team of the very best. The mobile task force was 10 times as big as what you've promised me, with a budget to match. Yes, I agreed to use local crime scene technicians and forensic pathologists, and I get that it's still too early to attach a permanent police prosecutor to our unit, but I want the top candidates, the very best investigators. Not the sloppy seconds that police districts around the country can't wait to get rid of. "You're meeting Gruba in Odense," Aline said calmly. "I'm sure he'll fill you in on folks' strengths and weaknesses." Louise shook her head as she stared at him. "We have been talking about this for a month and a half," she repeated quietly. "We've carefully planned how we can make this work so that P13 can become permanent, so that we create a national investigation department we can be proud of. And then you drop the ball when we're this close to the goal." This time, Louise left his office before Valine could protest. Logically, she knew it wasn't wholly Valine's fault. No one had predicted that the national police would be hit by a political austerity knife right as they were laying the foundations for the new travel force. When it came to the funding allocations, that was entirely dependent on which way the wind was blowing. But the fact remained that the travel force hadn't been nixed entirely, and Louise was still in charge. So she went straight from Valine's office down to the police garage to pick up the unmarked police car that had been allocated to her new investigative unit. Louise was sitting in Valine's office later that morning when the call came in. The victim was a 38-year-old innkeeper from Torsinge, who had been found murdered on the floor of the inn's restaurant 24 hours earlier. A local resident had called emergency services at 10:48 a.m. Louise didn't know much more than that. No witnesses had come forward, and the Funen police in Odense and Svendborg were working on the assumption that it could be a robbery murder, though there wasn't yet a report on what, if anything, had been taken from the restaurant. "Are you home?" Louise asked when Jonas answered his cell phone. "Not yet," her foster son replied, "but I've arranged with Ike to stay with him while you're gone." Louise had texted Jonas as soon as she found out that she was going to Torsinge. "No," she said simply, "you can't. You're staying in the apartment and taking care of Dina." She knew how harsh she sounded. Their deaf Labrador was perfectly content to have Melvin look after her, but their downstairs neighbor had his hands full now that his girlfriend, Greta Milling, was in bed with a bad case of pneumonia. The elderly couple had both been seriously impacted by Greta's illness. Her infection numbers were far too high, and she had even been hospitalized for a few days, then sent home again, even though it was clear to everyone that she was still extremely sick. Caring for her was taking a toll on Louise's 79-year-old downstairs neighbor, even though he tried not to let it show. "Fine. I'll just bring Dina out to Ike's place with me. I've done it before," Jonas protested. "She and Charlie get along great." Yes, Louise could just imagine. No doubt about it, it would be cozy with Ike's big German shepherd, a retired police dog of a substantial size. Dina and Jonas, Ike's daughter Steph, and Ike himself in his little studio apartment in Copenhagen's South Harbor neighborhood. A tight reluctance coalesced in Louise's chest. She still hadn't seen Ike since he'd gotten home from his trip. The 6-month-long leave of absence they had set out on together. The dream trip with their 2 teenage children that was supposed to bring the small blended family together, but had instead broken Louise's heart. She could still feel the sorrow and rage that had struck when Ike told her that he wasn't ready to get married after all, even though he was the one who had proposed to her. "You're staying home," Louise decided. "Melvin needs your help. He doesn't have the strength to take care of Greta while she's bedridden." Silence on the line. "Enjoy the hygge," Louise continued, trying to win him over. "You can do puzzles and read history books. You always have a good time together." "Mom," he interrupted, "I'm 17. "Well, then you can make some of that music you're so into," she suggested instead. It still melted her heart when he called her Mom. Jonas had been living with her since he was 12, and they had become a unit, a family. Melvin was also a part of that unit, and she knew that Jonas thought of him as a grandfather, which made her feel slightly less guilty about pressuring Jonas to stay home on the grounds of helping Melvin and Greta. I stopped making music a long time ago, he replied quietly.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?